Hello, everyone. We will just give everybody a couple minutes to get on, as we always do, and then we'll be right back with you. All right, without further ado, I think we'll get ourselves underway here. So thank you all for joining today. Looks like we've got quite a large crew, a little larger than I was anticipating, so that's great. Thank you all for joining. And joining me today is Dave Adekoyas. We'll do some introductions here. Dave, if you want to pop the slide, we'll get right into it. I'm John Mercado, CTO and co-founder of Bacon Unlimited, and joining me today, Dave Adekoya, one of our senior engineers, and also, as I always like to say, the best demo guy I know. So Dave's going to be doing some demo stuff for us today, and I'm going to be kind of covering the high-level stuff and talking about some new features that are coming. You'll be seeing some of that on next month's webinar, but we're already very excited about it. Want to kind of let people know what we've got coming down the pike here. So we'll be doing that. So thanks for joining me today, Dave.
Happy to be here as always.
Awesome, man. Well, let's move on and get into some quick housekeeping as we always do. If you haven't used the GoToMeeting system before, it's got a little section in there for questions. Please feel free to ask any questions you want. We'll answer those in the background throughout the webinar. And in addition to that, we'll be launching some polls. So keep an eye out for those. They're very easy to interact with. Just click on the buttons. Nothing challenging there. And then lastly, please, if you would, we'll leave some time at the end. If you wouldn't mind quickly filling out our survey, it does help us tremendously at producing better and better webinars and making sure we give you the information that you want. So with that, I think we'll kind of get going here. I do want to announce that we also have a YouTube channel, which is called Bacon Bits. And it's actually, the channel is just Bacon Unlimited, so you can just search that on YouTube. But it's filled with little videos we call Bacon Bits, and they are short and very, very helpful. So they can be used for training or just learning more about the product if you're considering utilizing Bacon. So with that, I think we'll probably go ahead and just get right into it and do a couple polls. Lane, if you would not mind launching the first of our two polls, we'll pop through these quick and get right into it. So what operating systems do you currently support? Mac, iOS, Windows, and some flavors of Linux. What do we got? And Windows always seems to be at about 100%, but a lot of Mac on there, almost 60%, and Linux and iOS bigger than usual. So a little bit more of a mixed crowd today, which is fantastic. And Windows actually fell below 100% to 96%. So take that, Microsoft. Right. Let's do poll number 2. Yeah, we ended at 96% on Windows there.
Yeah, look at those.
Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is vulnerability management in your organization? Which might give you a little tip of what we're going to be talking about regarding our soon-to-be out features. You know, some organizations really don't have compliance requirements, particularly if they're smaller, depending on what area they're in. But we're finding that is the dominant challenge these days. Oh yeah, we've got 73%, 70% saying that this is a 5 out of 5 here. So that's really good. You're going to be a good audience for this webinar, I think, just in a high point level, but also in our next one, we may start really getting into showing off that capability. So, all right, well, yeah, 71% were 5s, 13% were 4s. Just a really small group of people who don't consider it a 4 or 5 out of 5. So, vulnerability management is huge, and I know time consuming. So we're really excited to tackle that, since Bacon has all the components to do it today, but really didn't have some of the workflows, I think, that could really help with that. And of course, being able to actually sense the vulnerabilities. So we'll be talking about that in a bit. So the next phase of this webinar, I'm going to give a quick high level on why we use Bacon and what it is. And then Dave's actually going to show off our new version that's coming out here in the next week or two, 4.6, and why that's a really important step for Bacon. And then we'll talk about some of those new things that are coming, as I mentioned. So why use Bacon? Well, Bacon is an endpoint management solution that is really based on giving you real-time, sort of high-speed capabilities in all of these functions that you need to do every day dealing with endpoints. At Bacon, we sort of believe that endpoints are the soft underbelly of your computing environment. They're very flexible. You can, install all kinds of different software on them, and they're floating around out there in the world in most cases. So people working from home in different offices and on the road. And these situations, plus the sort of malleability of the operating systems, make them the most ideal target. So the two most successful ways that people break into companies is through endpoints and through individuals. So more, soft skill manipulation, phishing and all kinds of things like that. So we really wanted to take the endpoint management game seriously from a management point of view, not just to up the ability to make your environment or your organization more functional, more productive, but also really be able to lock down the security capabilities. So in order to do that, we have 3 core principles: visibility, control, and automation. And each one requires its precedence. So visibility is where everything starts. You need real-time visibility to know exactly what's on each of your machines, what hardware they're comprised of, and then what operating system they've got, and all the software that's installed. If you want to make successful changes and management happen, you're going to need to know what's going on. You're going to need to be able to monitor. You're going to need to be able to make really informed decisions. And you can't be informed if your data is two hours stale or something. And I know a lot of platforms have challenges and things like that. So that brings us to control. And control is really all about being able to take all of the functions of that system and manipulate them as you need to. It can also be about remote control, which we do have built into Bacon. But a lot of what I'm talking about is being able to successfully and easily patch systems, successfully and easily deploy third-party software, and be able to set every single setting that exists on your machines wherever those machines are. And of course, it comes back full circle because you need to be able to monitor all of that stuff. So you need to know that it actually succeeded when you run a job. You need to know if you changed a setting, what exactly that setting is now, and that it remains in that compliant state. And Bacon is really built to do all of those things. And then the last one is automation. If you can control it in Bacon, you can automate it in Bacon. And that's actually the most powerful thing that you can do in your environment. If you want to take the work of 10 IT people that have to work on endpoints every day and really reduce the amount of repetitive tasks those people do by many factors, you're going to need to be able to automate. And so Bacon was built to be an automation system. It's built to make it so that you can automatically upgrade your third-party software. So you can automatically set settings, and you can do it based on dynamic rules. So even if you add a new machine to Bacon months from now, rules you set up today can come into play based on the nature of those systems, what networks they're on, what their host name is, partial host name, IP address, the type of operating system, exactly what version's on, what software's on it. Just any of those things can be used in combination with one another to make very distinct dynamic groups. And that's a very, very powerful thing about Bacon. It doesn't really happen much in a lot of our competition. So with that, that's kind of the why Bacon. Maybe we'll just talk about some of the high level features real quick if you want to switch the slide there, Dave. And really, what is Bacon? So Bacon is a security first cross-platform endpoint management solution. It has a very easy to use, very high speed interface. It allows you to proactively manage endpoints by doing things like patching and monitoring, scripting, installing software, whether it be simple or complex, automating the process of installing software, and setting through our profile system all of the different settings, whether they be MDM profiles or our standard profiles, both of which give you a huge amount of control in what you can actually set on every machine. And you can do them in plethora, so you can have lots and lots of machines, and you can control them all at once. One of my favorite things, just to give a quick anecdote, we had a customer who was looking at a couple of pieces of software to manage firewall rules. Basically, they were going to pay pretty high cost for a tool, and its only job was to manage the firewall rules across all their entire fleet of endpoints. And their problem is that the tool, which is pretty cool, even though it is quite pricey, it works really well, but they were like, it doesn't work on Mac. And so they said, could we set our firewall rules with Bacon? And so we showed them how to do it, and they were like, well, if that's built into Bacon, why would I buy this other tool? I don't know. It just have a couple cool visualizations and charts, but for $300 a device per year for that particular solution to do that one task, it seemed a bit of a tall order. And now they just do it in Bacon. So there's lots of really interesting things you can do with Bacon that maybe gets rid of having way too many tools. And that's a common thing that we get. I've been on many demos, and people are like, we just have too many tools. We'd like to consolidate our remoting and our endpoint monitoring and the Mac tool that we use and the Windows tools that we use all into one thing. And you can do that with Bacon, and it's still very, very cost effective. So with all of those points in hand, Dave, I think it's time to hand it over to you and have you show off the product and let people see what's new in 4.6. And I'll chime in as you need me, and then we'll do some new feature talk at the end.
Awesome, sounds good. All right, let me go ahead and get us switched over to our demo here. All right, so how's it gonna work is we're gonna start with, as John said, some of the highlights of 4.6 that's coming up. First, I'm gonna start talking about some things you can't really see, and then we're gonna go into some actual things you can see. So starting off, we've enhanced our job updates in Bacon. So I do see a couple of current customers on here. So hello, I do see you in there. We've changed a couple things in how we process jobs. So previously, we would do something, let's say a patching job, and have 5 patches go out, and then Bacon would essentially install all 5 patches, and then return back to you with the result of all 5 patches. We've kind of made a change in the system to allow us to do this incrementally now, so it'll give you updates as each patch goes across. You can actually watch your machines achieve this goal and then see who failed, all that kind of good stuff. That's kind of some of the views we're going to be looking into in just a moment. In addition to that, for larger environments, we've also implemented browser-based caching. This is, again, something you're not really going to see, but what it does is it essentially passes on some of the processing of the data, the tables that we're showing to you, to your browser versus the database. It just tends to scale a little bit better. So for those current Bacon customers, you can expect 4.6 to be a little bit snappier too if you're loading up a lot of large tables. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. We're going to look first at some of the new views we have around our deployments for profiles and for patching and stuff like that. So to start off here, let's go ahead and go to logs. And now we have a new option here called profiles. Again, those current customers will see some slight differences here, so I'll point them out where I can. So let's go to profiles. We can now see the compliance score based on the profiles we're pushing out. So, how many of your machines are compliant with those configurations you're pushing? So let me just kind of pick one here at random. We'll do Windows Update Refresh. There we go. Actually, there we go. So what you're seeing here is I have one machine, and one of one is currently in compliance. So I have a little graph here that tells me who is and is not compliant, and then down here I can actually see the endpoints and when they were last compliant, and also when they were last online. It's possible they're not compliant, but they're also offline, so that would kind of make sense. And so that just gives better visibility as to the status of our environment, how things are being pushed out. So you can just like click a couple here so you can kind of see the same view. And so we've taken this kind of view and we've also applied it to things like patching. Because again, we want to be able to go into a job and see which machines were successful, which weren't, and then why not. So if I go over to jobs here, I'm going to choose one of my patch installs that is incomplete. I think this one's probably pretty good. It's got 2 patches on there. Maybe this one here has got 4 patches. Let's see. Alrighty, so we can see that we have complete progress here. Let me actually drop back. Let me find another one. There's one that has a machine that failed. Might be this one. There we go. All right, so we don't have 100% here for the patch job, but we can see here on the left-hand side, I pushed out 2 patches. You can see the duration it took to actually install those patches, so pretty quick, and how many endpoints we were working with. In addition to this, we also have some job information. So again, for current customers, we can now see if the job is run with unconnected or if this is a relentless mode job. And for everyone else, we will cover this when we do like the full like walkthrough demo in a little bit. So down here, we can see which endpoints were successful and those that failed. And we can also go over to patch details. And through here, we're able to see which patches specifically failed. So how compliant are we with the patches I pushed out? Maybe one's a very important security patch, versus the other one's just like a small incremental change or a feature update, something like that we're not super worried about. So with this failure here, let's actually go over to view logs. And now I'm able to see the logs of the machines that did run this patch. In this case, everybody else got it installed. They need a reboot. But this one down here looks like download failed. So possibly had some kind of connection issue with this machine. And I can probably get it by just re-pushing this job out to this machine, or possibly like restarting the Windows Update service, something like that, just standard troubleshooting. But again, for current customers, you can kind of see this as a really exciting view because it gives you a lot better insight, let's say, with less effort to see how successful your patching is in your environment. So next up on patching, let's take a look at some changes we've made there. So I'm going to expand patching on the left here, and I have available and compliance. For those current customers, we used to have history here, but we've kind of consolidated things. So available is going to look exactly as it did before. However, we do have some changes in compliance. And John, would you mind kind of giving us an overview of what we have today and what we're going to have in the future?
Yeah, so what we've kind of realized is what people often need is this historical data about all of the patches and their relationships to the system. So you'll see the same machine listed many times with every patch that's ever been seen in Bacon. Now you can start to filter these. We've got full filtering in here. So if you only care about, let's say, last month or something like that, you could set the timeline for just, February 1st to February 29th. It was leap year. And you would be able to get the entire month of February and only see patches that were related in that time. So what you'd be able to get is a match of every single patch in every single machine in that time. So because that's exportable into Excel, you could easily turn that into a pivot table and kind of cut it up any which way you want. That being said, we want to get more of that capability inside of Bacon. So in the version right after this one that you're seeing, we're actually adding some summary tables, which means summarized by patch or summarized by endpoint, similar to what you saw in the new logging view. And what that will allow you to do is say, only see each machine once, and based on whatever time frame you set, and you'll actually have to set a time frame in this particular new view, you'll get to see essentially everything that's related to that time frame. But instead of showing the same machine many times for each patch, it'll just tell you how many patches were available in that time, how many were successfully installed, how many are still available, and any others that are called historicals. And historicals are when you have a patch, but it got merged into a roll-up patch. And so it goes away, but it doesn't go away because you installed that exact patch. It goes away because you installed a bigger, better patch that had that patch in it. So that will show as historical, which is just as good as installed, but it is a slightly different thing. So that's marked as well. So all of that will be in more of a summary view. And then you'll have a different summary view, which will just list all of the patches, and it will show you how many machines have that patch available during that time frame. It will show you how many of those machines were successfully updated with that patch, and then how many were not updated with that patch. So you'll have all of that information at your fingertips. 100% of it is sortable, cuttable, refilterable, and exportable. So that's a really exciting thing that we're working on right now. And it kind of goes in line with our vulnerability management stuff that we're going to be talking about at the end. So I'll leave that for then, Dave, but I think that's probably the long and short of it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. All right, so with that, we're going to move into our standard demo, although do stick around. There's going to be some more talk of upcoming features after this. So for this demo, we're going to walk down the nav bar. So let me switch back to our demo environment here. And we're going to basically go through these features very high level. Of course, if you're interested, please do reach out to us. We love to give like personalized demos and like talk through use case scenarios, because I'm going to cover like some of the most basic stuff. I can't get into the weeds, at least not on this specific webinar. So again, if it piques your interest, please ask questions in chat, or you can also request demos, and we can kind of meet together and go over stuff. So let's start with the overview. So we're looking at here's a couple widgets. I'm going to explain these, and then we'll start again down that nav bar. So first off, we have alert. This is going to tell you if any of your machines have any active alerts. These can be things like one of your configurations. Let's say one of my security profiles is not applying on a machine. I can get an alert for that. Or it can be stuff like performance indicators, if machines are online, if services are running, kind of the standard stuff there. Next up here, we can see the endpoints that are online versus offline. Then here we can see which operating systems we have in Bacon. So again, we are cross-platform, as John said. So you support Windows, Mac OS, and various business forms of Linux. Typically, one's based off of Debian or based off of Red Hat. Next up, we can see patches. So how many patches or package jobs we have to send out. You can also see which devices have AV. And what this means here is that we're actually allowing you to select your own services for AV. So let's say if you've got Sentinel-1, you can select that service in Bacon, and it's going to track if it's currently running on your machines. But it is not just one service, it can be multiple. So let's say you're doing like a split, maybe you acquired a company or you're testing some solutions. You can actually go through and manually mark as many services as you'd like to contribute to this counter so it's up to date and accurate for your environment. Then lastly, on a security focus, we have encrypted hard drives. So today we support Mac OS File Vault as well as BitLocker on Windows, with some upcoming encryption support for Lux encryption on Linux. All right, let's go ahead and start with monitoring. So here we can see our rules configured. Again, these can be either configured by you or possibly a profile rule, which is kind of like double checking on like a GPO. It's kind of that thing where I want to make sure my configs are actually in place, if not alert me. So for the ones set up by you, these are the ones that can be custom configured to send things like CPU threshold alerts, memory alerts. Maybe you have old software that we have covered in our patching or our software repository. We can let you know you've got an old version of Chrome. We can let you know you have patches older than 14 days, all that kind of good stuff. And as you're going through and making these rules here, we also have options for how you want this alert to go out. So you can either create a Jira issue, an Autotask issue. We have direct integration with those platforms to both open and close tickets, as well as sending email alerts, which kind of gives us compatibility with the other platforms. We can just send an email to you, maybe your ticketing system, your IT team, that kind of thing. Once those rules are triggered, they're going to generate an alert. So let's move on to the next tab here. And so these are all the active alerts in my environment. I can actually go through here. I can select these and dismiss them if I like, or I can even export the entire table. And so this lets you just track what triggered an alert, what alert it was, and what time it was, right? That's kind of the most important thing, is when did it actually happen. Next up, we have support for outages. So I'm always a huge fan of getting alerts because I need to do something. I don't like alerts going off that we're all trained to ignore. So for that, I do recommend using outages. You can actually block alerts by device or by group, so that while you're doing maintenance, you're not unnecessarily causing tickets to be created and then closed and stuff like that. Then lastly, we have our NOC dashboard, and this is just a visual indicator of the health of your environment. So you can go through here, and as you notice, I'm mousing over these. A lot of things in Bacon are interactive, especially if there's some kind of green color. That's typically a link of ours. And so you're able to click on these to go directly to their endpoint details page, like so. But before we dive in there, let's go ahead over to hardware, and we're going to go to the endpoints table. This is one of the main screens in Bacon, kind of like a jumping off point for a lot of things. And so what I'd like to highlight here is just how much data we have in this table. It's at one point I was able to present this and cover every single thing. we're well past that point now. So some highlights are going to be things like we can see what IP addresses you have. If you've got multiple like this guy down here, it'll be comma separated. This allows us to search for it up in this box here, or of course we can do filters. So if I did something like 192.468.42, it'll find that in my IP addresses and filter, or if I'm maybe filtering by who's currently logged in or excuse me, searching, I can find that too. The search bar is very dynamic. It's going through all the columns. So it'll catch things like serial number or maybe the groups that you're a member of, all kinds of good stuff like that. Also for filters, we can do things like filtering for if you have software and stuff. But for right now, let's go ahead and jump into a machine. And we're going to cover first this UI, and then we'll look at the remote over here in the top right. So how this works is we have 8 different tiles on the very top, and as we click this, it changes the context of what we see below. So I'll click on System. Here we can see on the left-hand side some similar data to what we saw in the endpoints table. As well as on the right-hand side, we have the option to either add or create tags or remove tags, as well as the option of adding notes. And so keep in mind the tags and notes that you are adding here are going to be bound to the machine. So whenever I log in or maybe John logs in, we'll see those same tags and notes as well. So it's a good way to kind of categorize and keep your inventory all up to date. Next up, we look at disk. Here, we're able to see the drive utilization. In this VM, we only have one disk here, C at 88% full, as well as we have this option over here on the right for recovery keys. If we had BitLocker enabled on this VM, which we do not, it actually escrows this key, and this gets updated every hour so that we're able to keep the current recovery key, and this is like without AD or anything like that. So it lets us keep this very up to date for you. And as John usually says, this has been working 100% of the time. So far, we haven't had any issues. It's definitely a better hit rate than AD, I would say, which sometimes just kind of misses that mark and doesn't have the proper recovery key for you. So we're able to easily pull that here. Next up for network, we're able to see which interfaces you have here. So I've got one, I can see my IP address, IPv6, and of course, MAC address. And if it's active, in this case, it's just one, so it is. Over in policies, we can see what's been pushed to this machine. So profile, you can kind of think of these like GPOs. They're a configuration or a way to make configurations on the machine, which we'll cover in a little bit towards the end of the demo. I can also see what groups you're a member of. In Bacon, we have 2 kinds of groups. We have static groups and dynamic groups. Static groups are exactly what you think, where you make a group and then you add people to it, or you add machines to it, I should say, and it stays that way until you or some other admin changes it. Dynamic groups are a little bit different in which you're able to use those filters on the endpoints table we saw earlier to create groups based on criteria. So maybe I can make a group based on all online Windows endpoints that are in this specific subnet and then push software to that, like, let's say, off-site location. Except for software, pretty self-explanatory. You can see what software has been installed. This little cloud icon is kind of neat. So for software that's being tracked by our managed package feature, we're able to see if it's currently up to date or not. So this kind of gives you a heads up if you need to upgrade software for some of your endpoints. Next up for available patches, we're able to see what patches this machine has specifically, but I'm actually going to do patching over here. Just keep in mind that the patching steps I go through over there are the same for patching one machine as it is for patching all the machines. We try to keep our UIs very transferable like that. Next up under services, again, very similar. We're able to see what services are running or stopped with the option of starting and stopping them here or marking them as AV. And then lastly, on the log side, so here we're able to see what logs or what jobs that say this computer was a member of, what's been going on here. In this case, just a lot of profile deployments, but it just kind of gives you a shortcut to figure out what's been running on this machine, at least from the Bacon standpoint. Now, on the top right, we can see our remote control. We have screen, shell, and file system. And so this is part of your license. It's part of the installed client, basically just an additional feature, a remote. And so if I click on screen here, we're able to see your standard screen remote. I think most IT admins are pretty familiar with this one. Just like some very simple highlights. If we have a terminal server scenario, we are able to choose which session we want to jump onto or if we want to jump onto the console, as well as, just in case you're curious, we can interact with admin windows and stuff like that as well. You can type in your creds through like the UAC prompts for other users and things like that. So pretty standard. In the bottom left-hand corner here, we have your standard creature comforts. So different keyboard commands, options to push or pull the clipboard, as well as just type text onto the screen. In the bottom right, we have a couple neat things. We have things like kind of like a built-in task manager. So this can actually be accessed without connecting to the machine or without disturbing the user. But this allows you to see the processes running and stop those, as well as ability to manage services from this UI as well. Then, of course, in the bottom right, there are other options here like locking out the user's control in case you need to do something sensitive on the machine, or opening up a chat window if you just need to talk to the user really quick before you connect, or even while you're connected. Next up here, I have my shell remote. This is my personal favorite, as I always say. This allows you to get into the shell on the back end. Now, this one is invisible to the user. The screen side will give them a little pop-up that says you've connected, And it's also going to give them like a top bar they can use to kind of close the connection on their own, which will of course push you out. This one is completely behind the scenes. And so here you see I'm able to start up PowerShell, and this is a fully featured shell. So if I like make variables, I can do that. Everything you think is going to work in PowerShell does. I have like tab completion and good stuff like that as well. And so this is kind of one of my preferred ways to go about it because I'm able to easily copy and paste in here. And as you can see, it's pretty snappy as well. So this makes it very easy to manage your machines from like the back end. Then lastly, we have file system. This allows you to look at the file system on the machine where you can upload or download files, as well as just manipulate the file system, making folders, zipping stuff up, all that kind of good stuff. And again, this is also invisible to the user. So this allows you to do a lot of work without having to bother someone every time you need to like look at something on the machine or anything like that. All right, so moving on from there, we did talk about groups, but here's our groups UI. As I said, we have both static and dynamic groups. This is one of the ways that you can manage them. But now actually going to go over, we'll take a quick look at the software and services, and then we'll go over to patching. So in the individual machine view, we saw installed software. This is what it looks like for everybody. Again, very similar UI, same options here. We can mark the software as AV or we can uninstall, just like we could in the individual machine. And then over in services, same kind of deal. Here we're going to see the services installed on all the machines. Usually using the filters or the search bar here is kind of appropriate. So maybe I'd filter for, let's say, Ubuntu, add a filter, and then you can kind of split it up that way. And then as well, you're able to add these services as an AV. It'll mark it for everyone, regardless of the UI you're using. And then for any kind of service management, you'd actually click on it, and then here you can modify it for these individual machines. All right, let's go to patching, something I think most everybody's here for. It's one of our favorite things to talk about, at least internally. So I'm going to filter this by Windows, since that's usually the biggest like shared group among us. And so how this works is we're able to query each machine and see what patches they have available. And then we're able to build this table based on that data. So we're reaching out to everyone to get their own personalized list of patches and then combining it into this table here so we have updated information. How patching works is if I click on one of these patches, I'm able to pull back metadata. This is, in this case, from a Windows machine, so it's coming directly from Microsoft with the name of the patch, the KB, the version grid. That can be super handy if you have multilingual computers because the version grid will stay the same versus other things here may change to be localized. Then we have here categories, again, given by Microsoft, as well as a description, and if it does or does not require reboot. Then below that, we have a table of endpoints that need this patch. How patching works in Bacon is we can select some patches, so I'll just pick a couple here, and pick some of these. And I'll go to Actions and Install. This lets me install multiple. And then it's going to list all the patches I chose up here. And then below this, it's only going to list machines that need at least one of these patches. So I have 4 here, of which 3 require an update and 1 does not. That'll be, or excuse me, require a reboot and 1 does not. And so down here, I can pick a couple machines. And then we get down to scheduling. So I have install immediately. That's going to push it out to everyone right away. This Bacon BLT down here is actually offline as indicated by this red mark here. So if I push it immediately, this machine is just not going to get it. So at best, my job's going to be incomplete. What I typically recommend is actually using run when connected. This is going to let you push to everybody. But then for this one that's offline, we're going to queue it in the system and wait for them to come online and then send it. So that way everyone gets the patch. Because in my case, I'm not concerned with when you get the patch if you're offline. I just need you to get this patch. It's probably a security update and we got to get it installed. Next up, I have schedule time. So this will schedule it local to the machine's time zone. So I'm over here on the East Coast. That'd be 6 p.m. for me. If you've got other people, say over on the West Coast, some of our office or some of our folks are over in LA. That works for them too. It's going to be 6 p.m. Pacific. So as you schedule here, just keep in mind it is local to the machine's time. This allows you to delay this job until that certain time, in which case it'll then install. Then we also have relentless mode, which usually turn to John to explain, if you wouldn't mind, John.
I would not mind. Relentless mode is a feature that was requested by someone who's now a customer about 3.5 years ago, whatever, when they asked for it, they weren't. And what they asked for was, they said, John, this looks like a really easy way to patch, but when we didn't have relentless mode, they said, I can't just schedule a patch. I need to know that the patches I'm going to schedule are going to stop at some point. And I thought that was a really good idea, and we decided to implement it just a couple of months later. But in addition, they said, and not only do we need to be able to sort of get all these patches done in this particular time, or stop if we can't get them all done, but we also need to make sure that they can keep patching even if there's a reboot in the middle, because it often takes multiple reboots to get through a series of patches. And so relentless mode was born, and that's kind of the relentless part, is the fact that if you have, let's say, 50 patches and you're applying them to 1,000 computers, the patches will know exactly which machines to go to. They will go in a certain order because there's a whole algorithmic system that deals with that. And so you might have like 7 patches get installed, then there's a reboot cycle, then 5 more will get installed, then there's another reboot, and then 25 more get installed, and it either reboots or doesn't even need to, and it's done. So relentless mode is meant to handle that situation. And let's say after a couple of those reboots, the time runs out because some of these patches just take a lot longer than was anticipated, and they're going to go outside of the maintenance window. Well, if that happens, the job will cease. There'll be no more reboots. There'll be no more installations of patches, and the job will show as incomplete. And you'll realize, well, I got through 70%, but I'm going to have to go back and run another job when I get another window. And all of that is logged. You'll be able to see exactly what patches happened and which ones were unable to get completed. And that's kind of how that works overall. There you go, Dave.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, so that's basically the walkthrough for patching. Again, we can get more specific, but this is like just a general overview. Please do reach out if you have more questions and if you want to ask, let's say, how does this fit into your current patching strategy? Now, we covered the new menus here. Again, history was kind of phased out for, or really the old compliance was phased out for the new one, let's say. So we're going to skip these two. This is running on like our current stable version. And let's move over to repositories. So we have files, bundles, and managed packages. We're going to start with managed packages. So managed packages, this is a service that we're hosting that allows you to keep your software up to date. So we have a bunch of different software in here. And what happens is we're hosting a web service on our side that'll allow you to connect to it, figure out what the latest version of, in this case, say 7-zip is, and then where to download that exe. And your server will handle all of that. So on our side, we'll publish the latest version of 7-zip and the current version. Your server will see this, and then it will download the latest version of 7-zip and replace the old one in your file repo, which we'll look at in a little bit. Then next up, we have this column state. So states in Bacon are, again, just individual configurations, like installing software. And so how this will work is you're able to have Bacon automatically download 7-zip and then automatically build a state for you. And all you have to do is place this in a profile and push it out to machines. So let's say I could have 7-zip and Chrome and Acrobat installed for all of my machines by putting all these 3 states into a profile and pushing that to my Windows computer users group, right? Super simple. We also have the option for making your own packages in here too for any kind of like software you're installing that maybe we don't have in our repo or that we can't get our hands on. But if it's publicly available, by all means, please request it because we can add this or add to this repo quite easily. So let's suppose we have some internal software that's not in such a state that we can download it as a package. Well, we can actually upload that to Bacon's file repository here. It can be an MSI, an executable, shell scripts. You can upload every kind of file here. We're not really checking for it because ultimately what you're doing with that is up to you. So here, let's say I was going to install this MSI. I can actually go to Actions and Deploy. And this is going to allow me to choose my platform. I'll pick Windows. Then I'll choose Launcher to actually push this out to a machine and run it. I could just drop a file. Maybe I want to drop some font files in the fonts directory. I would just uncheck Launcher and just specify my directory in the next page. But here, let's say I want to go for an install, so I can select some machines. Again, only going to see Windows here because that's the one I chose in the other page. Installation locations where the files are going to be dropped, so it'll make these folders for me if they're not already on the machine. Then I have Run As, where I can either specify credentials. For Windows, that's username and password. And then for Mac OS and Linux, that's going to be just the username. But in this case, I'm just going to run a system. It's usually my go-to. And then any kind of flag. So this is an MSI, so I know I can do like a QN in here for quiet install. Then for a scheduled deploy time, this is basically the same as patching. The only difference is we don't have relentless mode in here, but the other ones work exactly the same. Immediately pushes out right away, fails if you're offline. Run when connected will push it out to everybody and queue it if you're not online, and then deploy at a certain time will delay it until that time local to your time zone. Pretty self-explanatory. In addition to files, I also have bundles, and bundles are simply a collection of files. So if I look at my 365 bundle here, just open this, what I can see here is I have 3 files. These are all in my file repo. I have an XML, a PowerShell script, and a setup executable. What Bacon will do is push all 3 of these to the machine and then run this one that I have launcher checked. So in this case, it'll run my PowerShell script and go through and take care of it. So you can see here I have it in a couple bundles just for like testing and stuff like that. And so this is a nice way to either install software with maybe one large orchestrator script. That's good for teams who like to push things on demand and don't really need the automation side, or just individual configs you want to be like super consistent with how you install software. This can just be a simple batch file with one line of all your parameters. It can be super simple or it can be very advanced. That's completely up to you. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. Now, last, let's take a look at profiles and states. So I've been talking about profiles and states a lot. Again, states are individual configs, like I want to set a registry key. I want to disable this service. I would like to change this network card settings or set up this firewall or run this script, install this application. Very simple stuff. A while back, I did a webinar on just like baseline configuration from like a security standpoint. And so here I just made a couple very simple ones. I think this is like an LGPO. This one just manipulates Windows firewall, and this one disables USB storage via registry key. So these are pretty simple, right? Just easy little commands that you can run. And then once you add them together, it becomes more powerful. So these states are combined into profiles, which is basically a container. And then these profiles are pushed to groups of machines. So again, you could have a profile for like your baseline configuration, and everyone gets this software, gets those settings. I highly recommend that. I like it as like a management standpoint of just being able to ensure I have a baseline compliance before I start doing anything special for like your environment or the machine type stuff like that. And then you can have these for really anything. Some people do create profiles to install individual bits of software. Others might do it by department or by machine classification, so all the workstations get zoomed, stuff like that. So it's very flexible, and these profiles are deployed on a certain time frame to refresh. So let's say you could deploy to refresh every hour or maybe every day, right? And when that goes on, it's then going to log it in our system. So everything Bacon does is logged in some way or another. If you look at system here, you can see some of my activity as we've been going through the demo. Also, you can see it's escrowing keys for some of those machines we looked at. So that's pretty nice. But then I also have the job log. Again, this is the old one. We saw the new one, the nice one. But this job log allows us to see everything that's automated or manually pushed from Bacon. So if I'm pushing software, that's going to be in this log. If my profiles are deploying, that's going to be in this log as well. And lastly, schedule shows you what's currently running and gives the option of manually pushing these out. Actually, I believe this screen is also updated in the 4.6, just has more fields. But overall, that's kind of how the job side of things works. Now, again, I could go further in. We've got things like RBAC support and SSO and different kind of like integrations, but I'm kind of running out of time here, so I want to give John enough time to talk over some features and also allow you guys to have some time to fill out the survey. So with that, we'll kind of finish off the standard walkthrough demo. John, back to you.
All right, thanks, Dave. That was really, really helpful. I think I know we have just a real basic slide to talk about our two new vulnerability features, but I think it's a really exciting time in Bacon where getting to a point where even though a lot of our clients use us to control many of the security requirements that they need on all of their endpoints, we were also um, thinking that we really needed to get into the vulnerability management side of things because a lot of people are spending a huge amount of time, not just patching, but actually sending reports about vulnerabilities that they know about on their systems and just having to track those in multiple different ways. So we kind of have two levels or two different integrations. One is technically an integration that works with Tenable, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And the first actually integrates using the National Vulnerabilities Database, which is kept up by NIST. And essentially what we wanted to be able to do was build a service that could talk to everyone's Bacon server. And essentially based on all of the software that you have that we know about because it gets reported in as what's sort of the inventory on your machines, that we would be able to match that. So not only do we know about operating system related vulnerabilities, but we'll also know about third-party software vulnerabilities. And essentially what you'll see is a whole new table in Bacon. That table, which is called vulnerabilities, will list all of the known vulnerabilities that exist on your current systems. So if you've got 1,000 or 5,000 systems in there or whatever, it will show every vulnerability and you'll be able to see exactly how many machines those are on and which machines they're on. And that's just the beginning. So the first part, you've got to know that it's there. But then the other part, and this is really, really important, is that we have mitigation paths. So there's lots of software out there today, like antivirus products, that will tell you about some vulnerabilities that are sort of there present on your machines. But what none of them can do is actually fix it. So they're a seer, but they're not a doer. And so with Bacon, we actually become the doer, and in the case of the vulnerability database, the seer. And so that's a really powerful thing, is you start out by being able to see what vulnerabilities you have, but then you have a few, simple, quick clicks, and you can actually mitigate those vulnerabilities. Now, there is a third step to this, and it's probably, well, I don't know, the most important, but it's just as important as the other two steps, and that's the reporting part. So I kind of mentioned that when we were talking about patching earlier, but you'll have the ability, once you've mitigated, and actually before you've mitigated, to look at several historical tables that will tell you when vulnerabilities became known on your particular machines. So you'll know exactly which machines and when had the vulnerabilities. You'll know when and if they were mitigated, right? And you'll be able to essentially export all of that data in a few different views. So you could do it from the perspective of the vulnerability itself. You could do it from the perspective of the endpoints itself, or you can export all of the raw data like into Excel and use like pivot tables to get it in exactly the format that you want. So we sort of have the ability to see it, to fix it, and to report on it, right? And that's really what people have been asking us for. And so that particular feature doesn't require any additional software. Everything is a part of Bacon. We do have a cloud service that does all of the tracking of the vulnerabilities, and all of the software matches to your environment. So anytime a piece of software exists in your environment, we'll know what the name of it is. We'll make a match to the NIST vulnerability database list, and then we will tell you when you have vulnerabilities, and then track all of the resolution. So that's the main feature. And that just by upgrading to version 5.0, which will be coming out in May, we'll be showing that off at RSA. Please come visit us there at our booth if you're going. But the other feature, and it's sort of similar, is a Tenable integration. We say it's Tenable Nessus, but we sort of speak broadly. It's really what was called Tenable IO, now called Vulnerability Management, which is the cloud service from Tenable, or Tenable SC, which is the on-premise version of that. So with either of those, if you're using those in your environment, you'll simply take your API key there, you'll put it in Bacon, and that will become the new source or the new seer for the vulnerabilities. Now, why do people use Tenable versus just something where we can pull it off of the National Vulnerabilities Database? Well, let's remember that Tenable is an incredibly popular piece of software because it is the most robust and the most capable and the most thorough vulnerability scanner out there. So it's taking actual scans of your endpoints, and it knows about every kind of vulnerability. So not just software, it knows about operating system oriented vulnerabilities, third party, but also configuration oriented vulnerabilities. So they refer to those in Tenable as plugins. So for every vulnerability out there, they build a plugin for it, and that plugin defines what it is, what it affects, and how it can be fixed. And sometimes it can't be fixed, and at least you know that, and that's important for people. They usually come out with fixes quickly after that. Whoever, maybe Microsoft or Google for some Chrome or something like that. So Tenable is going to give you more information than what's available only in the NIST database. The NIST database is probably about 90% as capable as doing it through Tenable. In environments where high levels of compliance are required or high levels of security are required, it's a really good idea to have a scanner. Tenable is the one that we use and happen to prefer. It's also the most popular in the marketplace with about 60% of the market share. So by integrating with them, we now have the best possible seer that exists. And then we once again become the doer and the reporter. So we create mitigation paths on 3 levels when you're dealing with the Tenable integration, for operating system issues, for third-party software, and for configurations. And so all of those, we create the fixes when it's a configuration, and those stream down to Bacon, so you can just apply them to the machines that need them, which is a huge time saver. But admittedly, those are less common. 90% or so of all vulnerabilities are solved with either patches or third-party software patches. So you'll have also that mitigation path, just like you did in the original feature that I mentioned. So both of these are going to give you a lot of power depending on which one you need to use. You can use both if you want, but typically the Tenable people are going to focus mostly on that. And we will be showing this off at RSA, but also showing the actual user interface next month. So come visit Dave and I for that webinar if you are very interested in that. And around the time of RSA, you'll be able to purchase the version of software that has that feature capability built in. So we do have some other things coming up, but those are the exciting ones, and we're kind of at the end of time here. We do have 10 minutes left that we wanted to leave so that you can fill out the survey. If you fill out the survey, we'll certainly be in contact, see if you have interest in Bacon. We do appreciate everyone coming today, and really looking forward to seeing your comments from the survey. Thank you all so much for spending your time on this today. And Dave, thanks for presenting.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye now.